Open Your Eyes is brought to you by the Belize Bank. Our country, your bank.
And welcome to Open Your Eyes.
Start your morning right.
I'm April Martinez.
And I'm Sani Kertano.
Good morning, and thank you for having us in your home this morning. Sani, Monday.
It is the 25th of April 2022.
It is.
And the Easter vacation for all students
Officially
is
over.
officially over.
Yeah.
They get ready to return to their classrooms this morning.
Yes.
And I don't know how my daughter feels, but she had to be kind of,
I can tell you how my brother
bed.
felt. He had to mentally and physically prepare himself from like Saturday.
Yeah.
Okay, Monday I have to get up. I have to go to school.
Hey, but if there's any good news, it's that it's the final lap
Yes.
for this academic year,
Yes,
right?
yes,
So
yes.
it's only a few more weeks or a month or two remaining, and then they go back on summer vacation.
Yeah, I mean, for college students, they went back from last week. And I guess for some, they're already maybe going into exam week. Some are practically done with the semester.
Yeah.
Some are at their last couple of classes. So, yeah, I guess for the most part, everybody that's not in the workforce is winding down for this summer.
Yeah. Well, for those who want the feeling or that vibe of being out and about to continue, well, Agric Weekend is
Yes.
quickly approaching. So if you're looking forward to that, then of course you will have something on your calendar for this
Yeah.
weekend.
When the last
be
time you
able to
gonna
do.
agree?
I'll be honest with you, April. I can't recall the last time that I've ever attended an Agric show.
Yeah.
My
Not even to cover?
observations, see, my observations are kind of weird, right?
Yeah.
In the sense that I see people get on a bus,
Yeah.
travel all the way to Belmopan to the showgrounds from parts unknown, I'll say, for the sole purpose of purchasing credits and toilet paper.
That's true. No, you're absolutely right.
So when I look at that, I'm like, okay, well, if I'm to attend a Greek show, it's perhaps to look at, pigs, cows, horses, not only livestock, but also vegetables and fruits and all these other stuff that has to do with agriculture.
Yeah, I can't remember the last time I went to Agric either. I guess as a kid or maybe in my teens, but my dad and my mom and my aunt and my grandfather, they used to specifically go for the rodeo.
Yeah.
And my grandfather used to train the barrel racers. And so when we think about Agric, we think about cattle, we think about horses, we think about pets and buying that plants. My aunt still would go, before COVID, she would still go for early morning, buy her plants and whip out before the crowd even reach. Yeah. And that is what Agric show means for me.
Yeah, well, for many in the rural communities, that's what it meant.
Yeah.
I mean, growing up in the 80s, in the 90s, there was a certain feeling, a certain symbolism as well, that when Agric comes around, you know what to expect. As kids growing up, my dad used to take us to the Agric show, and it was for that express purpose. We're going to look at livestock. We're going to, we're going to look at plants, citrus, all these other, tomatoes, everything.
Yeah.
And that meant a lot for us growing up in the city because that was the few times we had the exposure to farm animals, so to speak.
But I'm thinking about the evolution process of where we are today when it comes to access to things.
Yeah.
And so now, I don't know about Belize City, but for Belmopan, we have market day twice a week.
Yeah.
We have market day Tuesday and we have Friday. So if you don't get your produce Tuesday, you get it Friday. And the access to the abundance of agricultural products is is there. So when we think about the agriculture and trade show, last thing for everybody mind if we go look on plants and buy veggies because you do that on a regular basis now. Yeah. And so for me, I wonder what the purpose is now. Isn't it just an expo now? Isn't it just for commerce and trade now?
With the idea of diversification in mind, then you have to appreciate the fact that a lot of businesses showcase their products and or their services at the Agric show. So it's no longer limited solely to agricultural influences, so to speak. But I mean, like I said, and I was running it as a joke, but you know, you have people who go there, you know, to sell certain products.
Yeah.
Toilet paper, for instance. The telecoms providers, you know, make a huge thing of it.
All the universities are going to go out there and set up an education booth. All of the NGOs are going to go out there and set up an education booth.
Which is good.
It's great for knowledge and to get information out there. And also that place is big. I don't know if you've ever walked the entire compound that is where the agriculture and trade show takes place, but I recently found out maybe 5 or 6 years ago that they do like the motocross or the derby car races, and there's a huge track. It's so big. I have no idea what is going to be happening this year. But
here's a good thing though. This perhaps will serve as the first major event where you have a confluence of people from all over the country gathering in one location. I say first major event in the immediate aftermath of, you know, the regulations being relaxed.
Yeah.
So this is one, and then I think naturally we look forward to September celebrations where we're also off the impression that things will allow us to be able to gather, perhaps Carnival, the Road March, all these other things that are going to be taking place.
I think that's why people are paying extra attention to the Spanish Lookout Expo. To see how they would maneuver and to handle. That was for 2 days, and I know Agric is for 3 days, and it usually falls on the Labor Day weekend. But I'm seeing here that it's at the end of May.
Yeah.
So that should be interesting and to see how many people actually show up. But I am curious to see how they'll maneuver. I know people would go for the rides, parents take the kids for the rides. Almost every single Belizean business is out there.
Yeah.
Every single one.
You name it,
they have a booth. Yeah. You know, from the smallest of business to the largest of business will be out there. So I'm curious to see how it pans out. I mean, you know, they cover it, so I have to wait till I come back Tuesday and see.
This, right? I'll stay out of the heat.
Yeah,
because
it's gonna be hot.
Yeah, it's gonna be a fairly warm weekend. So yeah, I'll enjoy it from home. Listen to the radio.
We listen to it on the radio or watch it on TV. That's how I usually do it. Or I ask one of my friends then for go get me one a chicken pan the stick where running the where Quality Poultry would I usually offer. Just go get me that and then come home. That's what I usually do.
There we go.
But yeah, we have to get moving with our show. We hope that, you know, wherever you are out there this morning, that you're enjoying your Monday, and we hope to bring you some motivation this morning. And our motivation is taken from our dailyom.com, and it goes like this. Sometimes decision making is best done after marinating with all the information, creating a decision that is made with full intention. Sometimes when we need to make a decision, we can become overwhelmed or feel pressured into coming to a conclusion immediately. Often, a decision isn't required right away, and the sense of urgency we feel is merely a limitation that we placed upon ourselves. We might want to take time to visualize ourselves playing out the various scenarios to see which feels the best, remind ourselves of our goals, or merely sit silently in meditation, listening for guidance. Once we've determined that we do have the time to make a wise choice for ourselves, we can release the pressure with a deep breath and proceed to make the best use of our time. Doing so gives our hearts, minds, and spirits the chance to align, allowing us to make a decision that is right for us. When we allow ourselves the time to sit and allow understanding to sink in, we can co-create the best decision possible for ourselves and for everyone involved. What do you think?
I like the idea of being able to sit with your thoughts and put everything into perspective in order to make an informed decision, right? A lot of times our choices, our decisions are in the moment.
Yeah.
We don't really take time to, the eye opener says marinate.
Yeah.
I say ruminate. To be able to kind of, process,
yeah.
Look at things from multiple points of view to be able to say, okay, this is the course of action that I will take in this particular situation, right? And that is very important to be able to do so, because there's a sense of satisfaction that comes along with being able to make informed decisions, right? You would have considered everything, pros, cons, the people that the decision will affect, for better or worse, so to speak. And once you're able to do that, you make your decision and you're able to walk away knowing that everything was taken into consideration,
right?
So that it is mutually beneficial, right? There's a thing, and I don't really refer to it much, but there's like the rotary four-way test, that you look at certain things based on your ability to make a decision and who it will impact, what good does it serve, and all of these things. And for me, because of, and I hate to look at zodiacs and astrology and these things, but I'm a Libra.
Okay.
So decision making for me means a lot, because the scale has to be weighed evenly, right?
Yeah.
And I don't jump into things without fully being able to understand and appreciate what the ramifications would be. So everything has to be 50-50.
Yeah.
And if there's a time where the scale is tipped to one side more than it is on the other, while I'm able to understand perhaps why that decision needs to be made in that manner, I walk away feeling as if though, this should have been. Yeah. That's just who I am, though.
No, but and I envy that, because I am in no way, shape, or form that kind of person. And I'm working on it, and it's important to do that. But one of the things that the eye opener says is that we feel pressured to make a decision based on time or based on a deadline or something to that effect. And I know that comes with maybe the job or a rapid decision to sign a contract or something like that. And you don't read those terms of agreement properly, and they might not haunt you right away, but they might haunt you later on. And so it's always important to sit and process, which for a lot of us, myself included, it's a little bit difficult because we pressure ourselves. We like it has to be done now, and you know what, whatever the outcome, we'll deal with it later. And that doesn't leave room for intellectual development. It doesn't leave room for professional development. So if you're like me, where you struggle to make a decision right away, or you just jump into the fire first and then ask questions later, I hope that this eye opener does something right for you this bright Monday morning. But we have to continue on with our show for today. And right on time, we're getting into our weather forecast for this morning. Good morning, Francisca Wellington. How are you today?
Good morning, Miss April. I'm doing good. How about you?
Doing good for a Monday.
Okay, I understand that.
So talk to us about the general forecast for today.
Okay, so we had a bit of moisture over us for the past couple of days. The moisture has decreased a bit, so I should say we are having generally fair weather at this time.
All right, and our winds?
Winds out of the east, 5 to 15 knots, and that will produce choppy seas, 3 to 5 feet waves beyond the reef.
Okay, and our temperatures?
Okay, so peaking at 88 Fahrenheit along the coast this afternoon, 94 inland, 80 up in the Maya Mountains. And then overnight temperatures, 80 along the coast, 71 inland, and 65 up in the Maya Mountains.
Wow. And our outlook for Tuesday and Tuesday night?
Okay, so before I get there, we'll be only seeing isolated showers today, tonight, and tomorrow morning, another moisture plume will be over us. So again, we'll see a slight increase in shower activity. So I'm going for a few showers around the country tomorrow and tomorrow night, especially along the coast.
So it not be as hot anymore.
I don't think so.
Any warnings or updates for us today?
Okay, no warnings right now. We still have this sargassum issue where we'll be seeing sargassum along the full length of the coast during the next couple of days. For today, the fire risk is at a moderate level. Tomorrow it will decrease with the shower activities.
Hi. One day I want to ask you guys about how you track sargassum flow. That's always interesting to me, how you will always know when it would appear on coast and the abundance of it. So one day I'll ask you that outside of TV.
The sargassum you're saying?
Yes.
Okay, we track that with using satellite. We can see the patches moving in. So that's how. Right.
That's so cool. I learned something new this Monday morning. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Have a great day, and great day to all the folks at the National Meteorological Service of Belize.
Okay, thank you there. You all have a great day too.
Right, bye. All right, that's the weather. I mean, I'm good with the weather right now, the heat and the cloudy spells and the rain, as long as I don't have to go outside.
Oh, and if you do have to go outside, once you're aware of what the forecast determines, then you know what you need to do.
You know,
Rain or shine.
that works if you live anywhere else except Belmopan.
Yeah.
If you live in a Belmopan, people know that if it's sunny somewhere else, it's probably raining at home. That's how it usually works for us. But let's get into our show for this morning.
We have our Iota News segment.
Okay.
That we're going to be jumping into.
Thank
and there are a few points that we want to discuss. So that being said, we go to our Iota News. So April, over the weekend, the Belize Tourism Board headed a delegation that consisted of members of the media joining Miss Earth, Destiny Wagner.
Yes.
And they journeyed far south to Barranco Village. What is interesting about this, to me, is the fact that Barranco is arguably the farthest village, coastal community on the map of Belize, right? It's the farthest south. Yeah. After Barranco, then there is the Sarstoon, right? And that is the end of our terrestrial space, so to speak. But Barranco as a community is a village where things are exceptionally slow, right? If you look at the population of Barranco Village, it's very small, and it's comprised of very young and very old. So the student class or the working class is virtually non-existent, right?
Because everybody ventures out after.
Yeah, they either go to Punta Gorda town or they venture beyond Toledo district in order to be able to pursue education or work. And so Destiny Wagner and the team from BTB and the media journeyed down to Barranco as part of the entire Earth Day celebration. And they were able to, gift the students of Barranco Village, the primary school down there, St. Joseph, I believe it's called, with much needed items which coincides with the reopening of schools today.
Yeah.
Right? And so I wanted to highlight that because that is part of Miss Earth's, what would we say, responsibilities in terms of, being the representative. And these outings or showcases, if I may, falls within the grand scheme of things that she needs to do as part of her responsibility. So there she is with her sash and her crown. She's there with the Director of Tourism, Evan Tillett. Again, this was part of the weekend activity, and I know my colleague, Dwayne Moody, who represented Channel 5 on this particular occasion, will have a proper story for us this evening at 6. So that's the first thing I wanted to touch on.
I think it's a little poetic because this is the community and this school that she went to, and she grew up in this space. And so I think that for the kids to see her and for her to be there shows some level of inspiration.
Yes, yes.
That they
certainly for the female students.
Yeah.
This serves as an inspiration for them if they want to get into pageantry at any point in time, if they want to be able to represent the country on that particular stage or platform, then this is something that they can certainly look up to.
Certainly, but it also stems to you talk about it being a community where there's young, there's old, and there's barely a middle working middle class. But it shows them that this is what happens when they venture. One of the possibilities of what could happen when I venture out. And it's one of these countries, it's one of these villages that we talk about in terms of culture preservation, in terms of being so rich with Belizean heritage, but we don't see it. We don't see it. We talk about it, we don't see it. And so I think for Miss Earth or for just the villagers of Barranco in general, it was good to get that a little bit of coverage for the rest of the community, for the rest of the Belizean society to see them and to see what they actually offer as a village.
Well, I'll say
that
this.
BTB went to cover that is huge.
Yeah, I'll say this, right? As much as there are those of us who forgot that Barranco does exist on our map, I'll say this much. Barranco has produced many a great man, many a great woman, right? You think Andy Palacio, he's from Barranco, right?
Yeah.
You think of some of the preeminent educators in this country, they come from Barranco, right? And so the place means a lot. It has a certain cultural importance. For us who are Garinago, there's a certain spiritual importance for Barranco Village. Way back, if you look at the history of Belize, Barranco was once a huge community bustling with activity. It's one of the seafront communities where people travel far and near.
I mean, if you want to go to Guatemala, you catch a dory from Barranco straight through to Livingston.
Yeah. So that's the first conversation. The other conversation that I wanted to revisit is the push for the cannabis referendum. It seems as if though we're at a standstill at this point. I know that the last time I spoke with Pastor Louis Wade, he mentioned to me that they were waiting for an official announcement to be made with respect of the the church's referendum team being able to garner the requisite number of signatures to be able to present to say, look, this should perhaps now trigger the referendum. We accept and understand, however, that decision, if there should be a referendum, would be made by the Briceño administration, right? So the government takes the lead in terms of saying, okay, you've satisfied the requirements, then now we'll proceed to be able to have a national vote on whether we should legalize cannabis. Now, the conversation is one that is at the forefront of public discourse as controversial and as polemic as it is, because you do have people who are for and people who are against. And on either side of the great debate, there are strong points to be made, right? When we look at some of the concerns that have been put forward, while some would argue that perhaps there isn't sufficient proof to show or indicate that there are certain adverse effects that are associated with marijuana use, you would also have people who say, look, for religious purposes or for recreational purposes, they consume marijuana and there is nothing wrong with it.
Yeah.
They would argue that, right? From another point of view, there is also the argument being put forward, look, we don't have the necessary infrastructure in place at this particular point to be able to proceed with this thing.
Right.
Because if we're looking at industrializing marijuana, then certain things have to be put in place, certain systems have to be put in place, certain infrastructure needs to be implemented in order for us to be able to do it and do it the right way, right? And some people are arguing we're not there yet. We don't have all of these systems in place for us to even begin the idea of legalizing and mass producing and consuming and making value added and all of these other things that are associated with big business. So we're yet to find out from the churches where they are at this point. I know that we've been trying our best to get an update from the Minister of New Growth Industries to see where they are now that the 19,000 votes have been garnered.
You know, I often listen to people talking on the streets about the referendum, and most of the time people are consumed with the fact that it was brought up by the churches. And so the arguments come from, oh, that because the church wants it, and so, you know, this, and they're not listening to the other. But the reality is that we're not used to a transparency with the government. And this is not just this administration, this was from previous administrations as well, where decisions are made and they affect us, and once it is written on once it is signed, there is no going back, right? And so for now, I would hope that the reason why we're not hearing anything is because they are going back, and they have to. If you are going to deny your people a chance to go back and look at it again, it is tilting the way you think about democracy, right? This is a chance for people for not just the people, but for the government to rethink, revise, maybe look at some of the proceedings and maybe start an education campaign or something of the matter.
Well, part of the argument here is the fact that the government argues that this push from the churches and the other stakeholders is somewhat belated because the bill has been ratified to become law, right? And so if there was a concerted effort to get the voice of the people on the matter, it should have been done prior to this stage, because the end game, so to speak, has been met, right? The thing has been passed into law. And so if there was any concerns, any trepidations or what have you, it should have been done prior to this particular juncture.
Agreed, absolutely. But we also have a culture for us where procrastination is the way of our nation for some strange reason. And so I wonder then if this wasn't something that was spoken about a while ago, and now that it is coming to light, this giant push is because we never think they may actually do it, and now they're doing it. And so it's this push for putting something to a halt that they didn't believe would ever actually see the light of day. That is how I process it anyway.
Yeah.
But when it comes to the legislation itself, or whether or not we should have marijuana legal for recreational use, if you don't want to have it, you don't have to have it. If you don't want it around you, you don't have to have it around you. I find things to be very simple when it comes to things like this, or when it comes to other recreational laws. If it's not something that is going to harm you in any kind of way, you don't have to have it, and you don't have to be around it as a personal decision, right? When it comes to the use of marijuana, again, if you as a parent don't want your child to have it, you create certain structures in your household to make sure that they don't. If you as a stakeholder or as a vendor, as a business owner, don't want it in your private entity, you don't have to allow it to happen. You know, this bill is not for everybody, and that's absolutely fine. I think that we have a sense of a dramatic overstatement in our brains that the minute it happens, everybody going to become a drug addict, everybody going to become on this, everybody, and it's not the case. I find, we had Pastor Lewis here on the show, and I had asked him about the choice of, we use marijuana for medicinal purposes and so forth, and if you're going to create a campaign against the no to drugs, right, the no to drugs campaign, if you're going to do that, then that means you have to cancel out steroids, opioids, other painkillers that people are extremely addicted to, more so than something like marijuana. So I think that is why when it comes to the referendum, I wanted to see what would happen in the sense of, okay, maybe we go back to the drawing board and create an education campaign so that more people can learn more about it. Or, as the government, please tell me how you are going to monitor and make sure that the procedure goes according to plan.
On one hand, you would be able to understand or appreciate, for that matter, why there is a certain push, because we began, if you want to put this into some kind of context or perspective, we began with the decriminalization of a small quantity of marijuana, right? But while that is so, it never took into consideration several things, which includes where you would get it from, who is selling it to you, and all these other factors, right? It was simply to say that, look, if, for instance, the police stop you and search you, and they find this small quantity on you, you're allowed to go about your merry way. They won't ask any questions beyond, you know, what is there, what is apparent. To broaden it, they're saying, look, we now have to acknowledge that someone has to grow it.
Yeah.
We also have to acknowledge that someone has to sell it for you to be able to have it in your possession, for you to consume it. So the idea of legalizing it takes into consideration all the players,
that, right,
so to speak, right? But while that is so, and while that makes sense on the one hand, on the other hand, others are saying, look, we haven't really gotten from the people as a whole, a collective, as a nation, that they're collectively for or against this thing. And so we need to test it there to see what their position is. And when we look at that, we also look at the fact that the Belize Chamber of Commerce and Industry recently polled a few of its members as well on the very issue. And the responses were a mixed bag, so to speak. You have people who were for and against based on the questions that were being posed. There were 3 questions that were posed, right? And it kind of gives you an idea of the direction and the position being taken, notwithstanding the fact that it is not representative of the entire business community, because when you look at the questionnaire and the number of people who participated, if you're looking at 70 individuals or 70 businesses, that is not the quantum of businesses within the private sector, right? And so, like I said, it kind of gives you an indication of those who participated and where they stand on it. But from a universal point of view, it wouldn't be representative of everybody or the public thinking, so to speak.
True. I would like certain clarifications, which I don't think that would be difficult for the government to provide. And when it comes to who's growing, who's selling, and they're talking about having a particular license and so forth, that's all fine and dandy. But do you know how many people sell tomatoes in our country and grow it and go to the market and distribute it? No. So how are you going to monitor this? And that is where my question comes. Yeah. How are you going to follow through with your procedures? And that is what I want to see.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
I think part of it is also being able to allow for individuals to be able to cultivate a few plants for personal use, right?
Yeah, so if I have a kitchen garden,
that's and like I decide, saying, okay, you know what? You grow tomatoes, but you're not taking it to the Michael Finnegan market for sale on Saturday morning. You're growing tomatoes for your own personal use.
And is that a part of it? Can I do that then?
Theoretically, yes. I believe that is a part of it.
Okay.
That is a part of it. We'll wait and see where we go from here because, like I said, there seems to be somewhat of a lull from the churches at this point to hear from them exactly what's going to happen next. And we're still waiting to hear from the powers that be, the government in this case, to be able to tell us, okay, this is what we're going to do now that the 19,000 signatures have been garnered.
You know, part of me thinks that they didn't think they would get those signatures. That time span was very short. And you know, when I was in Belmopan, I saw them all over the place getting signatures, and I was in Belize City. They were so they really were working towards getting these signatures.
To put this quickly, there were a few discrepancies that they encountered along the way because while they met the 19,000 signatures, when they went back and sort of, you know, did their due diligence, so to speak, to be able to ascertain that the signatures are those of persons who are eligible voters, who are registered to vote, they realized that not all the signatures
have the registration.
So they had to go back and, you know,
well, they did mention that, and they made sure that hopefully that they were able to meet those the quota. But you know, I guess we will hear more about it hopefully this week. Now that everything is kind of going back after the holiday rush, everybody's going back. That we get to hear something. I'm very curious to see how this goes. The last referendum we did was the ICJ one, and that in itself was this giant explosion of yes and no and facts and non-facts and fake news and this and that. And so I'm curious to see how this goes. I like the idea of people getting involved with government because that is how it's supposed to be. So regardless of what the topic is, I like the fact that people want to be more aware and people want to be more involved in the decision making because at the end of the day, the government are public servants. They work for you and me. And if you and me say, I want more information, you should provide more information.
There we go.
And that's all I have to say about that.
All right, so that concludes our Eye on the News this morning. Certainly details of these stories and more will be shared with you at 6 p.m. in our evening newscast. And of course, if you're not watching it live on 5, you could also catch it on Facebook and of course, YouTube.
All right, and with that, we have to get into our conversations for this morning. We will have 2 conversations for this bright Monday morning, and our first conversation will be with the BNTU president talking about back to school procedures, get an update about what the BNTU on teachers' perspective on returning to the classroom will look like. And of course, we will conclude with talking about the 52nd annual convention that was hosted by the BNTU last week.
All right, and so our second conversation will be with the Ministry of Health and Wellness and of course, PAHO, and they will be discussing with us activities for World Malaria Day. All right, so that's going to be an interesting thing because, you know, everything is so pandemic centered at this point in time that we're forgetting that there are
other diseases out there. That's very, very true. But before we get into it, we'll take a short break, and when we get back, we will have our first conversation for this morning.
Download the SmartStream app on the Android Play Store and create your account to get access to movies and stream at home or on the go. Prepaid customers can purchase regular data packages or get a discounted rate on a special SmartStream package by dialing 7737. Postpaid customers will be billed monthly. Never miss a movie again with SmartStream.
After a rough week of school, Jake and his friends decide to treat themselves to frozen coffee. And since they don't have cash on them, they decide to use eCash. With eCash's geolocation feature, Jake can easily find the nearest coffee spot. With eCash's built-in option to split bills, Jake can pay the bill and his friends can reimburse their portion of the bill. Jake scans the merchant's code and confirms payment. Jake then views his transaction history and taps on the transaction recently made, then taps the Split the Bill button where he selects the Evenly option to evenly split the bill. The application splits the bill automatically. His friends receive and accept the request. Geolocation and splitting the bill via eCash makes Jake enjoy his digital lifestyle.
Together we can stop the violence by being responsible and respectful partners and fathers in the future.
I will take responsibility to respect women and girls and hold other young men accountable who use hurtful behavior and speech.
Toxic masculinity traits and harmful social norms about how men should behave contributes to gender inequality and violence and fear that women and girls face.
I realized that gender-based violence is a problem that will never end until all boys and men work to end it by resolving conflicts without violence.
We all have a responsibility, and that is why we encourage others to spread this message, to commit to advancing gender equality and to end gender-based violence.
I commit.
I commit.
I commit.
I commit.
I commit
to make changes
to end violence in my life
and elsewhere.
Together we can stop the violence.
10% of the tax levied shall be used for the payment of tuition, school fees, and scholarships for marginalized students. 10% of the tax levied shall be for the use of the Commission to fund public education campaigns on the use of cannabis, rehabilitation programs for drug users, and other social and sporting programs approved by the Commission. Inherent is that is an appreciation of an obligation to address whatever social ill that may arise from lawful use. And I say lawful because we still have provisions in laws to address unlawful use.
Galenia Hospital, located in Cancun, Mexico's premier tourism destination, is a state-of-the-art healthcare facility that provides highly specialized medical services. We are Quintana Roo's biggest private hospital with board-certified doctors and staff. Some of our services include cath lab, adult intensive care unit, neonatal intensive care unit, emergency rooms, operating theaters, ambulance services, and more. We are a medically accredited hospital by JCI, Accreditation Canada International, and General Health Council, providing extraordinary care in every specialty, from our cardiology department to our neurology center. We are focused on treating the entire person, body, mind, and spirit. Contact us at medicaltourism@hospitalgalenia.com or visit our website at www.hospitalgalenia.com. Come to Galenia Hospital in Cancun for a truly personal medical care experience.
Your life just got a lot less complicated with Belize Bank Contactless MasterCard Debit Card. Introducing our Standard Debit and MasterCard Platinum Debit Cards. Now you can make purchases anywhere MasterCard is accepted with one tap, pay and go. Your contactless card never has to leave your hands, especially in these times. And your card is embedded with multiple layers of security. Platinum card holders get to enjoy extra benefits like price protection, purchase protection, trip inconvenience, and luggage protection, just to name a few. Start enjoying a cashless lifestyle today with the Belize Bank.
Welcome back. We have been joined in studio by Senator Elena Smith. She is the president of the Belize National Teachers Union. And as we mentioned just before the commercial break, our first topic of the morning will be to discuss all things BNTU and of course the fact that teachers are returning to the classrooms this morning to commence what would be the third term of the academic year. Yeah. That being said, good morning, Senator Smith. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning, and thanks for having me.
There are a few questions that I would want for us to begin with, first of all, in this discussion, this segment. And what I want to get from you, first of all, is an idea of the morale of teachers going into this final leg of the academic year, taking into consideration everything that has been happening, the relaxation of regulations, the return of the 10%, and the overall effect of the pandemic on students and teachers returning to the classrooms. Let's start there.
Okay, so let's start with the easiest one first. In terms of the 10%, we have a lot of teachers who, while they have heard the pronouncement, are waiting to get that in hand first for them to believe. And I think we can understand the level of disbelief that our teachers may have in terms of this matter. We know that we, from our part, have done our best, to ensure that our teachers suffer as minimal as possible. Yeah. We tried to work with the banks to get this, interest rates for them, all of those sorts of things. But there are those who are very happy to know that, it will be reinstated. But we still have those who, while they are happy to know that, they are still skeptical. And I guess we can understand that. In terms of the return to the classroom, now we have not done a formal poll of our members to find from them, what they feel, how they feel, what they think, that sort of thing. But if we go based on initially, we have a lot of teachers who were very happy to return to the classroom because they felt that they needed that one-on-one with their students. They needed to have the children around them. And some of them felt that they were not doing as good a job with distance because they were unable to control what was happening at home. And so while I take my time and I prepare my packages, I give as much examples as I can, information as I can, the way the child works at home would be different from the way the child would work while with the teacher. So there was that concern. So for a lot of them, returning to the classroom gave them that chance to be with the children, to really do one-on-one with them, and to be able to see for themselves how the children are doing. Because as you may have heard, a lot of our students were getting A's during the pandemic. Everything was 190s. But when they returned to the classroom, teachers found out that those hundreds were now becoming 30s and 40s and 50s. And you realize that really and truly not all of them were the product of the students themselves, but was because of other persons doing the work for them or actually giving them the answers. And so it didn't give a true picture of what the child was doing or how the child was performing. So coming back to the classroom then gives them that chance to really and truly be able to monitor these children and to determine whether the child is really and truly grasping a concept or the child needs more help. So from that viewpoint, the teachers, for the most part, what we've heard is that they were quite happy being with their children. And if you notice, I say children because they are our children, and that is how our teachers feel.
I think one of the primary concerns for parents, and it perhaps is the same for educators, is the fact that while there was this prolonged period during which students were not in school, so they were doing online courses, some had packages and what have you, but they were not in the shared space, that physical space where learning can be administered, so to speak. The question is, how do you make up for that lost time? Because some people would say, look, the 2 years that they were out of school, for some, those were the formative years that would have allowed them to be able to learn and take in more during that particular period of time. But the pandemic kind of threw a monkey wrench in having these kids in the classroom at that particular time.
And when you have your babies, your infants at school for the first time, you teach them, all of these skills that they need to learn. How do I have my books? How do I, write my heading? How do I sit in a quiet place to study? All of these things, you work with them. So they learn rules, they learn routines. Now that they're coming back to school now, none of that was started. Most of them, there have been parents who really and truly try to find ways and means of helping their children to have that classroom environment at home so that they wouldn't miss out too much on those routines. So for those children, for those students, it would not have been that difficult to adjust to routines. For the ones who didn't have any at all, the teachers have to go back and try to put in place these routines, get them to understand that when you're in school, you do certain things and you do it a certain way. So the socialization that these children would have had had they been in school was not there. How do you bridge that 2-year gap? And while for some it may be easier, for others it will take a longer time. And so I don't think that we can expect our teachers to be able to bring up our students to where they should be in a matter of 3 months, in a matter of 6 months, having missed 2 years of that kind of interaction. And so that is going to be difficult. It will take some time, but our parents, along with our ministry personnel, have to understand that this will take some time. And so you cannot expect that a child who missed 2 years would be at the level that they should be, having missed so much.
Right. So then that begs the question of, does a child who perhaps is not at the reading level that they should be for continuation, should you let that child continue? Do you keep them? And you know, are you doing that child an injustice or a favor by simply saying, you know what, make them continue even if they're not ready?
Injustice, yes. From my experience, I have found that if you have children who can't do their math and their reading at the infant level, and you promote them, the gap becomes wider and wider, and so you know it becomes more difficult for the child to be able to cope at the higher levels. And so, in my view, if you promote a child who is not prepared, who can't read, who doesn't have the foundation, you are hurting that child more than you're helping that child. That's my view and my experience. But we have a lot of parents who are not in favor of repeating because they want their children to, just go through. And if they're at a certain age, it makes it worse. Oh, well, what will they say because this child is 10 and in this class, and they will tease him and they will. But they are not looking into the other aspect of it. They're looking at, okay, the child's age, the child has been in this class already, why keep the child back? They're not paying attention to the other impacts and the other good that can come out of a child having to do a class over. Now, we are at a point where it is difficult to make a decision in terms of what do we do with these children. Do we make them repeat? Do we send them up? Do we...
If you'd allow me to interject, I think there's a certain stigma that is associated with a child or a student repeating a class. Right? Because growing up, if all 31 of us are in the classroom, well, we know who comes in first. We know who gets skipped to another class. We also know who comes in last and who repeats. But we're not looking at it as though repeating is necessary in this particular case for this child to be able to catch up with his or her studies and learning. We're looking at it as, well, that's the one I don't see. So automatically there's a stigma that is associated with that.
And who does that? Because these 5-year-old children don't understand that concept.
Parents.
So it's us, the adults, who have our children believe that you know what, repeating is something so bad that you must never do it. Now, in our days, we were skipped. I have not heard about children being skipped as much as back, 60s, 70s, when I was going to school. You don't see that much around this time. But you don't even see repeating as much as before either. Because a lot of times, and I will tell you, a lot of our teachers really and truly go through pain when they know that a child that they have been teaching for the whole year cannot make it to the other level, and that child is being promoted. It really and truly bothers our teachers to know that this child can't cope. And I have this child down as having to repeat, but the parent comes into the principal and the parent, gives all of this trouble, and the principal then says, you know what, we will send the child. Let us give the child a test over the summer and see. Come on, if the child didn't do it for the entire year with the teacher, how do you expect that child will, over a period of a month, maybe accept the parent sends a child to a tutoring class?
I don't believe that educators and or the administration needs to acquiesce to the wants of parents. If the glaring fact is that your child isn't up to par with where he or she should be with the academic courses, you can't allow somebody to say, well, okay, then the pressure on me if you put her into standard 1 if you could barely read in an infant 2. And that is a huge part of the issue.
Who go all the way to the ministry with these issues. They want my child to repeat, and my child has been this and that, and they can't. And next thing you know, you come to school, the teacher doesn't even know. When you get to school the following year, you see the child is in a new class. But wait, I had that child on the list because the child needs extra help.
But then those are the issues that are not openly openly discussed with parents, teachers, and the public. Because if you are socially aware that your child can't read at an infant 2 level or at standard 1 level, why are you going to pain them in the process of continuing? And like you rightfully said, they don't understand.
Right.
But these are also the parents or the guardians or, you know, whosoever is around, that they do the injustice by also giving the answer to the child during the pandemic. So the whole process of you know, and I did the online learning. My mom did the online learning, and we're both there. Like, we can hear the parent giving the answer to the child, and we have to say it out loud. We would like them to do it on their own because they need to learn the skills, right? You already know, but then it becomes a fight.
Right. But some of them come and quarrel with you. They literally come and quarrel with you, the teacher, because you are saying to the parent, listen, this child didn't do this work. You know, I know how Johnny works. I know how Johnny writes. This is not Johnny's work. Because the teacher having been with a child for so long. After the first month,
brilliant overnight.
After the first month, I know how Johnny writes.
Yes.
So Johnny can't come and tell me that, teacher, I wrote this, because I know that this is not Johnny's writing. And I think sometimes people don't understand how much you as a teacher know your students individually. And you can tell, this is not the way this child would write normally. So somebody wrote this for you, or somebody told you how to write this.
I think that we often forget that teachers spend more time with the children than the parents do on a regular basis.
Fair enough.
They do.
But I think it's one of the things that I think I would like for parents to understand, though, is that if you have a child who is not doing well, especially at the foundational level, infant 1, infant 2, those are the best years, in my view, again, in my 37 years of teaching, those are the best years to have your child stay back and get that foundation, so that when that child leaves from there, that child can sail right through primary school and can go on. But if you send the child through without the foundation, and then standard 2, standard 3, 4, 5, you want the child to repeat, then how much would it help the child if the child didn't get the foundation? And that is the important part. You have to get. I had a child in my class once. Her parent, her mother, was a teacher. And the child was not a child who was, say, willing to work. You know, you had to be behind her to write. You know, do your work, finish your work. And she was very, very slow in writing. And the mother went to the principal, and the mother said, I want my child to repeat. She's still young. She can catch up, but I wanted to get the foundation. Now, I have always been known as a strict teacher, because when you come into my class, you come to work. You're not coming to my class to play. And so I will not tolerate children in my class playing or not doing you cannot leave my class without my work. I mean, everybody know me. Oh, you know, here, Smith, everybody straight now. And it might not be something to be proud of, but I am, because I know that when my children leave my class, they have a, you know, they are set with that foundation. So this teacher asked for me to be her child's teacher. The principal said, are you sure? Miss Smith is very strict, you know. Yes, that's where I want her. That child repeated infant 1. I think it was beginners. Repeated beginners. That child got a good foundation. She went right through. She's a teacher now.
You see?
She's a teacher now.
So then, Senator, I ask you, so what happens? What happens to these kids now that they're 2 years of out of learning? You have all of these pending issues. I would imagine that when we come back in September, that these issues, it doesn't take a long, it'll take a while to resolve them. How are the teachers and the principals alike dealing and coping with these issues? Is there any room for discussing, you know, maybe keeping back a child or doing extended summer courses? What are the plans for BNT on the teachers?
Well, I know that the ministry, the chief had raised the matter with us in terms of, you know, this is the situation. We know what the issues are in terms of you know, the 2 years behind and where the children are right now coping. How will we address the matter of these children who are unable to progress? And so, it's not that we are not aware of it, but it's what do we do or how do we deal with it? And that is the part that we have not yet met along with the ministry to discuss and see, okay, well, what is going to be the position of the ministry in terms of what will happen when June comes? Will we just send everybody through like what happened, a year ago? Or will we say, you know what, if you are at this level or below, you have to stay back? Or at this level, or do we put in programs in the schools to say, okay, we'll have these pull-out programs that if a child was at, let's say at 60, for example, maybe that child can come up within a certain period of time. So put the child up, but have the child do a pull-out program.
So let me ask you this then. How critical is it to have in place a ranking system? Because prior to the pandemic, when I look at my child's report card, I can say, wow, she's doing excellent. She's leading the class. With the pandemic and the fact that many of the courses are being done online, the report card no longer has first place, second place, or what have you. It just has the grade point average by semester, right? Now, if you're looking at perhaps the ranking system as a scale to see where the child is in the context of a classroom full of kids, you can use that as a measuring stick to say, okay, well, fine, this child is performing within this particular bracket, top 5 or bottom 5 if that were the case, or what have you.
In that particular class, you may have 3 or 4 classes.
Yes, yes. So now in the absence of that particular ranking system, how does one determine where the child is? I mean, you're looking at grades, yes, but you're not classifying them in order of where they are, from 1 to 31 if that's a classroom full.
Right, but you would be looking at the child's performance in the subject areas. So not where you are first, 5th, 10th, whatever, but how well you are doing in the various subject areas and how well you are able to grasp those concepts, or how well you grasp the concepts in those particular subject areas. And so for the most part we look at language and math. So if the child can read well, if the child can comprehend, if the child can do math, then the child is able to function, because once you can read and understand, you can cope with the other subject areas. And so those would be the areas that we would normally look at to determine whether a child can be promoted or not. If the child passes those 2 areas, they can be promoted because they can make it. If like what we say, you scrape dog, you just make a 70, the child may be able to move on with some help. And then the parents will have to understand that, listen, your child just barely passed. You'll have to give this child extra help, or find summer classes, to put the child in so the child can improve a bit, so the child doesn't fall back from that 70 to 60s, 50s, whatever that may be. I think going forward though, in terms of how do we address these gaps, and how do we ensure that our students are moving up. Again, as I said, we have to understand it's going to take some time. So we have to give teachers, in my view, more autonomy in order for them to be able to determine, how do I maneuver during this school year? How do I move around the curriculum to be able to suit where my students are? And I may not be able to cover everything in the curriculum, but I should be able to at least cover the basics that my children can go to the other level and can still cope along with the child who maybe was bright and was able to do everything.
All right, and since you brought up the curriculum, I wanted to switch gears into, because of the intellectual level that majority of the students are, is then the curriculum going to shift and also maneuver to the level of where the students are? And I ask this because, you have, I know 2 years, no teachers, computer-based, Google has everything, and just jam-packed with so much information for a kid to learn in a short period of time. I don't see that sustainable. So I'm wondering if now that you're going back, you understand that the level, not all students are at the same level in a particular class. Is the curriculum then going to shift to make sure that everybody gets the same learning credibility that they should?
Well, they're never at the same level.
No.
You never get a class where they're all on the same level. So you always have different groups in your class where you have to cater to those needs. So in your class, for example, since we like to use ABC, you have the bright children, you have the average, and you have the slower ones in your 31 out of 31, and you have to work with those children at their level to be able to bring them up. And so this is where, when you are teaching, you use your differentiated instructions. so that you have to give the children work to suit their level, but at the same time challenge them a little bit so that you can be moving them up slowly to the other level, or at least to the average level. Having gone back right now and having seen where our children are in terms of where they should be, if you look at what the curriculum asks for or requires, we have seen where they are nowhere near that. So our teachers have been told, listen, you have to meet your children where they are, and from there try to bring them up. So you can't just go into the classroom and say, okay, we are now in April, and the third week in April I should be teaching, I don't know, long division, for example. That is where you should be, but can you do that? No. So if you do that, you're going to frustrate your children. So what you do, you go to where they are. So you look and see where they are. So what are the first things that they should learn to be able to get to this point? Do they know these prerequisites, if you will, to me teaching them this? And then you start from there. And so they may not be able to do that in April, maybe until end of May, for example. And so when that time comes, then you do it then. And that is why I'm saying our teachers have to be given a little bit more autonomy in terms of being able to maneuver through the topics, through the curriculum, to be able to know where I should be doing or where I should be at, what I should be doing, to whom and for how long.
If one were to look at the overall impact of the pandemic on the education system, while we're able to sit and say, well, these are the drawbacks that have occurred as a result of not having kids in the physical classroom space, what would you say is perhaps one of the greatest advantages coming out of the pandemic? I ask that because I am thinking, if we're to be optimistic and say, well, look, let's look at the cup as half full as opposed to half empty, I could sit here and say, perhaps one of those advantages is the fact that teachers, like students, have now embraced technology fully. That is one clear example of something that has happened that is favorable to look at. What would you say is one of those advantages?
Well, that would have been the first thing that comes to mind. And we are at a point where we have said to the ministry, listen, we have moved to this point not because we did so on our own. You know, our teachers were all that willing to do that, because we have to understand that we do have some teachers who are scared, if you will, of technology. You know, the younger ones are into it, and so even the children. And so a teacher perhaps who may be around my age and would not have had a lot of exposure, would not have had the need to use technology, probably didn't use it any at all, and so, you know, you're kind of afraid to use it. You don't know, you have to learn it. But we've said to the ministry, listen, we have gotten to a point where we have had to use technology across the board. That was the way we were going. Is it that we are now going to go back now to chalk and talk and say, listen, you cannot bring your computer to school, you can't bring your tablet, you can't use your phone anymore? Or is it that we are going to find space now for our children to be able to use technology during the school day? Because that is important. You cannot have your children at this point and then suddenly you go back, to what it was. So there has to be a conscious effort to ensure that going forward we include the use of technology in our classrooms as much as possible. I mean, it's not going to be the only way, because a lot of our children don't have access, and we have to recognize that as well, because we don't want to put them at a disadvantage. But there has to be some point in time where we use more technology than we were using before. And so for me, that would have been one of the biggest plus, if you will, the advantages of the pandemic.
And also imagine then that would become with a great deal of investment from teacher, the school, and the ministry. What has been the response from your teachers when it comes to the hybrid learning this past semester or this past academic year? What has been their response?
It's more draining. It's more time consuming. It takes up a lot of their time in terms of planning and trying to get things prepared as opposed to using time to find meaningful activities for their children. And that has always been an issue with us as teachers. We spend so much time actually planning our lessons for the week. You know, I'm going to teach this in math, so this is my objective, I'm going to do it this way and that way, as opposed to finding or having the time to literally sit down and plan games, you know, plan activities for your children. So you spend half of your weekend writing your lessons as opposed to making a game, doing a chart, you know, doing other fun things for the children, because even though you have it maybe planned in your lesson, you don't have the time to do it the way you would want to do it because there's so much time spent on doing something else. So those are some of the things that we really and truly have to look at in terms of going forward. You know, how do we cut down? And I think with the reform to the curriculum, we are seeing where we should be having some of those changes coming forward so that teachers would spend less time planning and more time engaging meaningful things that their children can be using and can be learning from and can be benefiting from going forward.
I would imagine that would be another positive outcome from the pandemic, because you as a teacher would have to be a little bit more innovative and creative and have them use, instead of having a word problem where Pioneer buy like 20 watermelons and had to give away, you know, you go into your house and find these household items and tell me how you're going to problem solve A, B, C, and D.
If you have somebody at home who is there to guide you along and to work with you, because again, depending on the age, a younger child will not be able to do that. And so if I am teaching fractions, for example, a child can't go and get an apple and cut it into parts because a 5-year-old, you know, you can't use a knife, you can't. So again, so while for some it may be good, for others, you know, it might not work out. But I think another positive as well would be parents and their involvement in their children's learning, because we have seen where parents really actually were forced to become teachers. For those who did it, they were forced to become teachers, and I think I hope that for the most part our teachers understand our parents understand or have a better understanding or appreciation for what teachers go through on a daily basis. So imagine you have one child at home or two at home, 2 children in your home that you're working on, and you can't get them to do the work. You can't get them to settle down. You can't get them to sit in a corner, but the teacher has 30, 40. So I am hoping that the experience that parents had over the last 2 years would give them a better appreciation for work that teachers do, and they would fully and truly understand when teachers come to them and say, you know what, your child isn't doing this, your child needs to do this, that they will understand that as a parent, I need to be more vigilant with my child, I need to help my child more, I need to go to school and check in more about my child, what is he or she doing, you know, those kinds of things. And so I think that could be a positive as well, but I would want for us to continue on that trend, for parents to be more involved.
Let's segue into another area here. Let's talk about continued professional development for teachers. When we look at what the pandemic has done in terms of upending the way how things were in a normal course, so to speak, now we're trying to get back to a sense of normalcy, which means that teachers, like students, need to get back on the ball. They need to be able to continue to get the requisite number of points, if I may.
Yeah, CPD hours.
Yeah, the hours to be able to remain on the ball in the classroom. Let's talk about that.
One of the good things that technology helped with was the fact that our teachers were able to continue to learn during the pandemic, and they didn't have to leave and go somewhere as we would normally do. So normally during the summertime, you know that August is the month when you're on call, and then you go for 2 weeks and you do workshops for 2 weeks. That didn't happen 2 years ago. So we did a lot of online training. So again, technology. So from our end as BNTU, we offered a lot of training as well, and we did so via Zoom. The ministry did the same thing. I know the ministry has this platform, this Teacher Learning Institute, where the teachers can sign in sometimes at their own time, and you can log in and you can do these courses. And you are given not just the course, but you are also given assessment to do. So I am testing whether you really and truly took time to learn this material. They get an assessment, and at the end of that, once they complete all of that, they are given their hours and their certificates. So that allowed for us to be able to have access to more development courses, to more PDs. And our teachers were able to do so from their homes at their own time, when they were free. And I think that for the most part, many of our teachers prefer that. Because, I can do that.
They can work on their own pace.
To Monday night, Tuesday night, I can do 1 hour tonight, I can do another hour the next day, but I finished my entire course within a specific period of time, and I'm able to do the assessment and then still get my hours for that. So, and at least for us, it was cheaper, because we didn't have to bring teachers into a venue, have to rent a venue, all of these things. So costs for the ministry as well, costs went down a lot.
I would imagine it would be easier to track as well the teachers that get their credits, the teachers that get their certificates, because it's all there on a platform, so you'll be able to know.
And you can go in now and you can see, well, I did this course, and you get little messages, you have this assessment that is due tomorrow. So it gives you reminders. So, I mean, I am doing a course right now. It's an online course, and I will tell you this. I find it very difficult to have to sit behind a computer for 3 hours and listen to a person teaching me, and especially if it's something that you don't really have a liking for. A liking for, because there are certain subjects you don't like. So like history is not one of my favorite subjects. I mean, I like talking about what happened or things like that, but to sit down and listen to a timeline being given to you of what happened this year and that year and that year, that's not my favorite. And so imagine sitting up for 3 hours listening to that kind of session. So for some, they prefer the face-to-face, but for others, the online was better for them and more convenient for them. So I think a lot was done during the pandemic in terms of offering training to our teachers, both from the union side and from the ministry side, and so they were able to have access to a lot of training. I do hope that it can continue, because a lot of our teachers, are in need of training in sometimes specific areas that may not be offered. So, having been teaching for all of these years, these 37 years, and teaching at the same level, for example, I can plan for my infant one class without needing to have a book. Because I could tell from off of my head, if I'm teaching reading, what I will teach first, next, that is up here. But there are teachers who are new and and who still need to get some of these courses to help them to go along. And then those of us who are older, who are more experienced, we may need training in different areas. And so it allows us to know, to be able to look at what is being offered, and this is going to be meaningful to me, so I can take this one, but this one, I already know that, so I need that one. So it gives us that option, and that is good for our teachers, because you do training to suit your personal needs as a teacher.
Well, we're quickly running out of time, but I want to talk a little bit before we go about the convention and what was discussed and the results of your 52nd annual convention.
Right. So it wasn't a convention where we had elections. That is going to be held next year.
Right.
So this is my final year as BNTU president. Next year, in April, when we have convention, we're going to be electing new members to serve the union. And then I go into my merry way and I go back to my classroom. But it was our regular convention where we did our reports. Each branch had to present its report. Our various committees, myself as president, our executive secretary, you present your report on what occurred during the course of the year. And then our guest speaker was Reverend Andela Moore. She did an awesome job with our theme. Our theme was God is our guide, resilience is our pride, BNTU forever. And she did an awesome job with that theme. Looking at what it means, to have God as your guide, and what it means to be resilient. And people might see that as, say, well, resilience is our pride. You shouldn't have pride. That kind of, that's a sin. But it's the way you look at it. And so, because we are a resilient people, we are able to overcome many things, and we are able to stand up as often as we do, because we are a resilient group of people. And then we had presentations from the ministry in terms of the TLI, the Teaching Learning Institute, the Teacher Learning Institute. And we had our president from the Caribbean Union of Teachers who did a presentation on unionism. So that our young teachers, our younger teachers can understand what unions really stand for, why it's important to have unions, why it's important to belong to and to support our union, and what should be the work of a union. It's not just about looking after razor pay and things like that, but it's also to look at how can we help our teachers to be better teachers, but how can we help the country to be a better country in terms of our good governance issues and those kinds of things. And then we passed, I believe, 2 resolutions. We didn't have much this year. We passed two one financial resolution and then one to do with our meetings. And that I think that our teachers, the comments that we've heard, that the topics that we offered this year, because we also had one of our own members, Sister Ifasina, offer a session on love language. And teachers really and truly enjoyed the sessions that we offered this year. And we heard a lot of positive comments in terms of this was one of the best in terms of the topics that we offered, and teachers were really and truly engaged in the session. So I think we did well, having to have it virtual again. Yeah. I think we did quite well, and next year we go back to our face-to-face for our election year.
And speaking of the face-to-face, do you have any other comments or concerns about going back to, for your teachers going back into the classroom in September?
Well, I know that right now a lot of them are concerned because of the classroom space and social distancing. How do we have our students really and truly distant in the classroom when they are so small spaces? And that, you will hear that a lot from our teachers who also have underlying issues. Right. So I am concerned about my health. I want to be with my children. I miss them, but I have to be concerned about my health too, because if I'm not healthy, I can't take care of them. And so while they are happy to be back for the most part, the concern is still there in terms of, how do we cope with all of these children in one space, in a small space at the same time. Yeah. And so we are hoping and we are praying that as we conclude this school year, from now to June, that there's going to be no issues. We won't have any teachers getting sick, and any students getting sick, to the extent that they have to be hospitalized, and that we can end the school year on a positive note. And then come September, we are hoping that along with the management, that schools will be at least better prepared, and they will have whatever supplies they need for our children when they come back in September to be able to do better, to improve on what we found to be lacking during this time. It gives us some time to observe, to learn, and then to better prepare for September.
Well, thanks a lot for having joined us this morning for this conversation, Senator. It's been most enlightening in terms of understanding where teachers are and where students are in the context of the classroom and the return to face-to-face learning. Thanks again for joining us.
Thank you for having me, and I wish all of our teachers and our students the best as they complete the school year.
Thank you.
So we're going to take our next commercial break, and when we return, we're going to be discussing malaria with our friends from the Ministry of Health and Wellness. Stay tuned.
Technology is ubiquitous, and it's transforming how, when, and where we work. Fulltech Systems is placing award-winning devices in the hands of information workers, allowing them to work without compromise in a world without wires, to innovate, create, and to maximize productivity anytime, anywhere, satisfying the needs of the desk-centric remote and field worker and every other worker in between. We are providing the industry's best devices to businesses going through the process of digital transformation. Partner with us today to provide the solutions that will allow your employees to work effectively and efficiently to enhance your customers' experience. Fulltech Systems, your technology center, where you'll come for the price, but stay for the service.
Download the SmartStream app on the Android Play Store and create your account to get access to movies and stream at home or on the go. Prepaid customers can purchase regular data packages or get a discounted rate on a special SmartStream package by dialing 7737. Postpaid customers will be billed monthly. Never miss a movie again with SmartStream.
My position in relation to the referendum, I will not discredit that it may be useful. But what we have to appreciate is the cost attendant to a referendum at a time when we need to direct any and or all energies and resources to the needs of our people. That money can be used to instead increase the employment wage from $5 to $8. That is the point I'm making. You see, the cost from this bill, we could use it to inform the minimum wage instead of 5-8. That is the point I'm making. So let's not get, and I keep saying, and I cannot say enough, with all deference and respect to our differing views and positions, but let's not get carried away by wanting to not appreciate the benefits and good in a proposition.
Dwayne Moody, Isani Cayetano, Marian Ali, Paul Lopez. Your News 5 police teams do whatever it takes, go wherever they need to go, so you can catch the story wherever you are, whenever you want, on whatever device. Channel 5 believes on television, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, because news is now everywhere, all the time, and so are we.
Whether you're at home, on the road, at work, or at school, if you see news happening or suspect that something might be up, call or text the Channel 5 News Belize tip line at 672-5555. You don't have to give us your name, just give us the tip. That's 672-5555. Call or text us so we can check it out.
And we'll be back in a few, so stay tuned. Thanks, Jen. Hey there, we know you have to head out to work shortly, but don't forget that you can stay tuned by watching us on our Facebook live stream. Find us at Open Your Eyes BC, and you can continue watching there. You can also download Facebook Watch on your streaming device, and you can watch at your own convenience.
And for all the behind-the-scenes fun, follow us on Instagram at OYE Belize. So,
find us
and follow us
today.
When someone you love becomes a memory, the memory becomes a treasure. Channel 5 introduces the Daily Obituaries. The Daily Obituaries will broadcast all death and funeral announcements and memorials to honor your loved one's life and memories. The Daily Obituaries airs on Channel 5 prior to the evening newscast, with subsequent repeats at 10 p.m. and 12 noon the following day. It will also be placed online on our social media platforms, all for a standard package fee. Celebrate their lives and memories with Channel 5's Daily Obituaries. Honor in life and reverence in death.
And we are back, and joining us for our second conversation this morning, we have in studio with us folks from the Ministry of Health and Wellness, Dr. Cynthia Terry, the project coordinator, and Kim Bautista, the Vector Control Chief of Operations. And joining us via Zoom, we have Dr. Job Joseph, who is the Malaria Advisor for PAHO Belize. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, guys.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. All right, well, for those of us at home, and for myself, can you talk to us a little bit about World Malaria Day? What is the Ministry of Health doing about that, and what is the campaign like?
Okay, good morning. So today is being celebrated globally as World Malaria Day. It's being celebrated locally under a modified theme, maintaining a malaria-free Belize starts with me. And World Malaria Day is basically an opportunity for the global community to basically voice our concerns in order to keep malaria high on the political agenda globally. Simply because there are still regions globally where malaria is responsible for a high number of deaths. Okay. So especially in several countries in continental Africa. So it gives us an opportunity, as I said, to keep it high on the political agenda. For us locally, we have basically enjoyed 3 consecutive years of 0 local cases. So it gives us the opportunity to embark on a campaign basically to sensitize and empower residents, citizens, to basically take ownership to prevent the reintroduction or the reestablishment of malaria in Belize. So that's basically the purpose of observing or commemorating World Malaria Day.
Is it that more and more Belizeans are aware of certain responsibilities that we have, individually or collectively, when it comes to malaria awareness? Because I ask because one of the key things that we've always been taught by way of an awareness campaign or in a classroom setting, for instance, is you need to do away with receptacles that would have water that would allow for mosquitoes to breed and what have you. If we're saying that we're at a 0 rate at this point for the past 3 years, is it that we've finally understood that, you know, we need to get rid of all of these receptacles and these items that would be breeding ground for vector-borne diseases?
Yeah, okay, let's establish early on, okay, there's basically 2 campaigns that tend to occur simultaneously. When we speak about mosquito vectors in Belize, you're talking about those Aedes vectors that will transmit dengue, Zika, chikungunya. Then you're talking about Anopheles vectors that will transmit malaria. Dengue being more of a urban type vector-borne disease. Malaria, traditionally, it occurs in rural areas. So what has happened over time is that we've been focusing quite a bit over recent years on dengue. As you rightfully said, speaking about having that shared responsibility, getting rid of breeding sites and things like that. So that is because dengue over recent years has been, I would say, the primary vector-borne disease in the region. If you look at 2019, that was the highest record number of dengue cases within the region on record. Now malaria in this region, it is still of primary concern. It's falling almost into the category of a neglected tropical disease simply because as the burden of the disease is going down, less resources is basically being put into these campaigns to sensitize persons. So that's why you would tend to see more visibly us focusing on the dengue campaign, but silently we've been working over the years with respect to malaria, which I believe only yellow fever has been a more long-standing or the first major vector-borne disease prior to malaria locally. So, but the malaria program itself is a program that precedes, I would say, officially it organized back in 1957, but there were there are records that show even from the 30s that majority of hospitalizations and a significant amount of deaths even in the 30s and the 40s were related to malaria in British Honduras, which is now Belize. So, but over time there have been efforts to eradicate this this disease, which started in I think in 1957 with the global malaria eradication efforts. That was mostly funded by UNICEF, I believe, at the time. But over time, we've had success, but then eventually the program went from a national malaria eradication service to a national vector control program, and it started integrating, as you said, dengue, chikungunya, Chagas disease, malaria, among other diseases. So the whole dynamics has transitioned quite a bit over the years, but the program itself has basically been focusing mostly on malaria and dengue.
Let's get Dr. Sorry, go ahead.
And just to complement what Mr. Bautista has said, I know you spoke about if we've learned to eliminate receptacles and made changes in our environment, but also with having malaria being integrated into the vector control program, there have been advances as well in the distribution of long-lasting insecticide nets into different communities. So that has been successful as well, and targeting micro areas where the incidence would have been higher or where the risk of transmission would have been higher. We've also been fortunate to have access to medications that are still working for our people that are exposed to malaria as well. In many countries, some of these medications no longer work. They're resistant. In Belize, we're lucky that these medications still work. Yeah. So that has also helped us. We've also have access to recently to more diagnostic methods that are rapid, that are easier to use out in the communities, so you don't have to wait 2 weeks or 3 weeks to get a malaria test result. Now you can go to your community health worker that can do the test, and you can get a result within 15, 20 minutes. So that also has contributed to the efforts as well. And we've enlisted a lot of voluntary collaborators in the community. So it's no longer a problem just related to the medical field per se, but we see more and more communities taking ownership of trying to eliminate malaria as well. So all of that has contributed as well.
So for this year's campaign, and we understand, like you gratefully mentioned, COVID kind of took the front forward on a lot of the ministry and World Health Organization efforts to try to bring down that pandemic to a halt. For this year, when it comes to World Malaria Day, what is the campaign structure like? You are the project coordinator, so how is the ministry working along with PAHO to get the campaign and the word out there about malaria?
So maybe Dr. Job wants to come in on this and talk about.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you very much for this question. I think it's very, very relevant. I mean, we do have COVID, and we know that, and the Ministry of Health is making effort to bring down COVID cases. But malaria is still with us. And then we have the unique opportunity of having eliminated malaria for good. I mean, we will not have malaria if it is eliminated in our country. Now, the fact that we have COVID, Ministry of Health, PAHO, IDB, and other partners, we've been very strategic in the last few years where, like Dr. Cynthia was saying, we have now other tools like rapid diagnostic tests. I mean, even though we don't have our microscopists working in a week on a weekend, for example, that person with signs and symptoms of malaria can still get a test done. This year, while our focus is on COVID, we still think that malaria is still there, and that's the reason why we are trying to raise awareness about malaria elimination. We want health professionals. We really want also other people working in the malaria community to know that malaria still exists in Belize, and we have the unique opportunity to eliminate the disease. I mean, that's why we're working together, PAHO, IDB, the Ministry of Health, together to raise awareness on malaria elimination in the country. I don't know if Dr. Cynthia want to compliment or if you want me to say a little bit more about that.
Sure, and we talk about COVID affecting malaria efforts, and sure it has. I mean, Mr. Bautista can tell you how many of his vector control supervisors have been diverted to COVID campaigns and vaccination and testing, etc., to support the national effort. But at the same time, COVID has also helped us in a way that it has closed our borders. So the risk of importation of malaria into Belize from our neighbors like Guatemala, Mexico, Honduras, Nicaragua actually reduced as well. So we were kind of in a bubble, like Mr. Bautista likes to call. We were in a bubble. So now that that bubble has been opened, now we actually have to make sure we put a lot of effort into awareness, into testing, and ramping up all the surveillance efforts that we've kind of put aside for COVID during this time.
I always, yes, go ahead.
Something I would want to add also. I mean, because Belize is receptive, that's when the mosquito is everywhere in Belize, the risk will still remain with us. I mean, the idea is now, as Dr. Cynthia just said and Mr. Bautista always said, we are not anymore in the bubble because the border is not closed anymore. I mean, we will have people coming from neighboring countries where malaria is still endemic, not only from the neighboring countries, people coming from all over Africa to visit us. I mean, the probability of having malaria re-established in Belize is still high. I mean, we still need to have proper surveillance to control and trying to timely detect any malaria case that might happen in our country. Over.
For me, my generation, it wasn't really malaria. It was cholera, it was chikungunya, it was dengue, leishmaniasis, and so forth. So I only recently realized that malaria was a thing in Belize when I had to go abroad, and they're like, you need a malaria test because you are from this country that is on a list that says you have X amount of cases of malaria yearly. Why is it that Belizeans are still unaware of this data that surfaced in our country? When we think about malaria, we think about cases in other third world countries. So where's the education gap there?
Yeah, I think as I alluded to earlier in terms of looking at the morbidity of the disease over time, if you look at, and I had provided some images, some maps and stuff to share with you guys. If you look at in the 90s, you had about 60–70% of most communities in this country, and they're well over 200, with multiple malaria cases. And so looking at that transition over time to where we are now in 2022 at 0, I think that we, as I said, a lot of funds have had to be diverted to education campaigns for other activities. If you look at 2013 and 14 with the introduction of chikungunya in the region, and then in 2016 it was the introduction of Zika in the region. So you're talking about the vector control program is basically a small program that operates with roughly about 63 staff countrywide, and they're responsible for all vector-borne diseases and all operations on the ground. So we tend to look at what is basically the priority at the time, and in the case of malaria, there are certain routine operations that even up to current day we still conduct. So we distribute insecticide-treated bed nets to targeted localities. We also do house spraying, which is what you're familiar with, the indoor residual spraying. So that's a little bit of what we've had to I've had to do over time. But in terms of, as you mentioned about being on like a travel list, warning and stuff like that. I think I would want to take the opportunity to also discuss the benefits of being declared malaria-free. And today, being World Malaria Day, the Ministry of Health, the Minister has made an official request to the Director General of the World Health Organization, declaring our interests and our requests for an external evaluation to take place and commence exercises towards the latter part of this year to declare the country malaria-free. So that in itself is a monumental achievement for not only the Ministry of Health, but all persons that have been involved in malaria from the control phase to where we are now in an elimination phase. So you're talking about over 200 to 300 community health workers, malaria voluntary collaborators, supervisors and workers that have been there for 20, 30 plus years. So there are benefits that come with having that malaria-free status. So of course, once you're given that status, you join a small group of countries, Argentina, Paraguay, El Salvador, which was declared malaria-free in February 2021, and next in line is Belize. So once you declare that and you share your experiences and your stories, it serves as a motivation for countries that are battling malaria and also dealing with the high mortality rates. In 2020, we were looking at over 600,000 deaths attributed to malaria. I believe it was, if I'm not mistaken, we're looking at over 241 million cases in 2020. So there is an experience to share. Also, having that malaria-free status, it also has an impact on tourism because the CDC publishes that travel advisory that is shared with all travel agencies. So having been listed there, or not listed there, I should say, or having been declared as a malaria-free country, there's an economic benefit in terms of tourism. So when you look at the introduction of chikungunya and Zika, you had cruise ships being diverted.
Yeah.
You have persons that basically the entire tourism industry within the Caribbean and the Americas was disrupted. So once you have that status, there's an economic benefit. Also, the economic benefit trickles down locally because you're talking about avoiding a loss in terms of productivity in the workforce. So when someone is sick with malaria, you're out basically anywhere from 3 to 4 weeks. And it's a disease that can basically spiral from one case to dozens of cases within a matter of days. So I think there are multiple benefits in terms of for the country. It's a monumental achievement. There are many persons that have been involved in this, and locally, as I said, I mentioned a few of the stakeholders, but in terms of regionally, around 2013, I believe it was, there were many agencies involved in this region to basically give countries a little push and have a reorientation of their programs. So you had, of course, PAHO leading the way, the IDB, the Global Fund, Clinton Health Access Initiative. There were so many stakeholders that even to this day, behind the scenes, they continue to support the program and pushing us. So we continue to be part of a regional malaria elimination initiative being funded by the Global Fund and spearheaded by the IDB. And that project will basically continue well into 2023, at least initially. And in the case of Belize, it will be more in terms of focusing on how do we prevent the reestablishment of malaria going forward, because the easy part, I believe, was getting to zero. The hardest part will be preventing. So if you look at the borders being open, new industries in terms of, you look at Santander, who import labor from Guatemala and other Central American countries coming from endemic areas. As you all are aware, there's a shortage of migrant workers in the banana and citrus industry at this time. These workers have to come from somewhere, and so we have to fight. The government has to see how they facilitate these workers coming in. So these workers will basically be returning to the country in the months ahead, and so these are avenues for the reintroduction of malaria in Belize. So going forward for us, it's to put measures in place and have a surveillance system in place that if you get, and you will get, imported cases, that you could detect those early to prevent transmission from being reestablished. We get cases from Mozambique, Africa, Equatorial Guinea, Paramaribo, Suriname, Escuintla, Guatemala. There's so many. Every year you get at least a couple imported cases. And Belize, not only foreigners, Belizeans living abroad, working abroad, and traveling abroad. So I think that the work basically starts now, and if we thought that it was easy to get to zero, I think that the challenge will be maintaining zero, which is where our team...
and that is where I want to bring Dr. Job into the conversation. So with Belize being at zero, I imagine that other countries are trying to get there. So how are you as the malaria advisor for PAHO working on that campaign for other countries to maybe follow the Belize model?
I mean, this is a big success story, actually. Yes. Belize is one of the big examples for the region, as Argentina was a couple of years ago, and El Salvador last year, as Mr. Bautista was saying. PAHO is working with all the countries. I mean, some of them, the burden is a little bit higher than Belize. That's why it's not as easy as we say it. But we work with them to decrease the burden of the disease, to try to reach that stage, the stage where Belize is now, to 0 cases until we eliminate the disease completely from the territories or borders. I mean, there are some criteria. I believe you will be asking questions about how Belize will be certified as malaria-free, what we need to be certified as malaria-free. We are trying, or we are working with the countries in the Americas, all of the countries in the Americas where malaria is still endemic, to bring down the cases and then reach 0 cases for 3 consecutive years. After that, the country can request the malaria certification. That's the way we work with them. I mean, Belize is a very good example, and El Salvador was last year, and Argentina a couple of years ago, Paraguay also.
And I think to complement what Kim was saying in regards to certification as well, if we look at the 2 populations that are most affected by malaria are infants under the age of 5 and also pregnant women. So it also has a big impact on our health indicators for the country. So it's a huge public health success if we can get certified as malaria-free as well, because it would also demonstrate how our public health system has also advanced as well, and also reducing mortality in these very vulnerable populations as well.
Definitely. If I may jump in also, the burden on the health system will be reduced. I mean, when you don't have malaria as a big concern anymore, I'm not saying we don't have surveillance for malaria, but at least we know it is eliminated. The morbidity is reduced. I mean, the health system will be able to deal with other diseases that are not malaria. I mean, it is good for the health system per se. That's why it's a very good success story.
And a lot of time when you hear, because Kim was talking about the Regional Malaria Elimination Initiative project, a lot of times when you hear a project, you think, oh, it's a one-time thing, and when the money is finished, then we go back to where we were. And the interesting with this project is that it also required a lot of counterpart funding, meaning that the government itself had to put in a huge investment into eliminating malaria in Belize and then maintaining the 0 malaria status. So there is ownership as well from the government side. There's the biggest investment, like I said, was from the government. And there we were given some indicators. And if we meet these indicators, there's also a pay for performance bonus that you can get back. So there are some incentives to continue as well. And hopefully with the ownership that we'll take on, it will be something that we'll be able to sustain rather than just see it just as a project, a one-time project.
So today being commemorated as World Malaria Day, what activities are we looking forward to?
Yeah, so unfortunately, while we have activities planned, we are competing with Vaccination Week in the Americas, which is a very important and big event. And then there's also Laboratory Week this week. And then there's Malaria Day, World Malaria Day today. So we're actually working as a group in the different districts, and there's no one set activity for today, but it's actually spread out for the entire work week, where we'll be having different visibility events, or being a part of some of these visibility events in terms of health fairs, testing campaigns, and things like that. So one of the bigger activities that we've been working on over the past weeks is working with the banana farms in the south. So there are like 21 major banana farms in the south, and part of the requirements of these farms is to have a health and safety officer. And so we're actually expanding, doing training even during Malaria Week, expanding in terms of our training to basically expand our testing network. So we mentioned about workers, migrant workers coming in. So we want to have testing available at these farms. When a worker is employed at these farms, or whenever they have any febrile episode, we will be able to test these persons on site. So there's multiple activities that you guys, I'm sure, in the media will be seeing throughout the course of the week, but it's being integrated quite a bit, as I said, due to the other health priorities this week as well.
All right. Well, thank you all for joining us this morning. Unfortunately, we are out of time for today, but any last comments for our viewers for World Malaria Day and the initiatives that we should take to keep Belize malaria free?
I think it's just, sorry, go ahead, Doc.
No, go ahead, Doc. After you. Ladies first.
So it's just to say that we have to always think malaria, even though we don't see it. We don't, in your generation, you might not see anyone who suffered malaria. You still have to think malaria, because the risk of importing malaria is there every single day, as long as we have our borders open. It's not something we can prevent. So we always have to think that. And my other thing was to give some recognition to the vector control teams and the districts and the community health workers and voluntary collaborators who may not have had the opportunity to be here, but they work constantly and in difficult conditions many times to make sure that we can maintain this zero malaria in Belize.
Dr. Joe?
Yeah, my final word would be the challenge does not stop there after you eliminate malaria. And as Dr. Cynthia was saying, we need to continue thinking that malaria is near us, is not too far, if we don't have a good surveillance system. It is one of the requirements, one of the criteria for malaria elimination is having a good surveillance system in place to be able to detect any imported cases for you to avoid malaria reestablishment. We don't see it, but it is around us. We need to have a good surveillance system, capacity to detect, capacity to treat, even though we don't have any malaria cases in Belize anymore. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you all for joining us, and for everyone at home, remember, think malaria always for this day of World Malaria Day. And that will take our short break, and when we come back, we'll be wrapping up our show for this morning. Stay tuned.
Applying for a Social Security sickness benefit? Here's what you need to know. A complete claims package includes 1. Sickness claim form fully completed by the claimant and medical doctor. 2. Salaries record form completed by the employer or HR representative. 3. Proof of bank account such as bank book, online banking, or statement displaying your name and account number. To submit via email, you need to take a clear photo or scan of the documents and email to claims@socialsecurity.org.bz. Be sure to include your full name, social security number, and benefit type in the subject line of the email. Or you can drop off all completed forms into the Dropbox slot at the nearest branch office. Deadline to submit is 14 days from your first day of illness. All forms are available on the website at www.socialsecurity.org.bz. Social Security Board, safeguarding you, your family, your future.
Hola usuario de eCash, la aplicación eCash está disponible en español. Cambiar el idioma de tu aplicación de eCash de inglés a español es rápido y sencillo. Deja mostrarte cómo se hace. Primero, abre tu aplicación eCash. Introduce tu PIN. Toca el icono More en la parte inferior de tu pantalla. Selecciona Security. Selecciona Language. Y luego selecciona Spanish. Vuelve a introducir tu PIN y ya está. Tu aplicación de eCash está ahora en español y puedes seguir disfrutando de tu cartera digital eCash. La aplicación eCash de Belize Bank te hace la vida más fácil.
Messi! Off goal! What a goal from Leo Messi! What an incredible strike from Leo Messi! Neymar and Messi is standing over this. Messi! Off goal! What a goal from Leo
Great
Messi!
entertainment stays with you, and we bring you great entertainment. Next Gen, the ultimate digital experience.
Download the SmartStream app on the Android Play Store and create your account to get access to movies and stream at home or on the go. Prepaid customers can purchase regular data packages or get a discounted rate on a special SmartStream package by dialing 7737. Postpaid customers will be billed monthly. Never miss a movie again with SmartStream.
We are back, and we're at the tail end of our show this morning.
Interesting conversation.
Yes, indeed. We had two topics that we discussed this morning. Well, the second one was
covered,
malaria, which we were discussing with our friends from the Ministry of Health and Wellness. And of course, our primary conversation was with the president of the BNTU as we discussed teachers and students and the whole idea of returning back to school and looking ahead for the next school year with full face-to-face instructions.
I definitely had to think about all the information that we discussed this morning with Senator Elena Smith in terms of how everybody is feeling about it. And I think that when we talk about our children going back face-to-face fully, that's when we realize that we are still in a pandemic. And more often than not, we tend to forget that jam-packing all of these kids in a tiny classroom space, breathing that same air is kind of what had us going into a pandemic in the very first place. So it would be very interesting to see how the ministry and the BNTU work along with the teachers and the schools to ensure that there is enough social distancing, that everybody is getting the same amount of work, and also making sure that the teacher is doing not just doing their job, but also getting that moment to relax and breathe and to make sure that they are regenerating for the days to come, because that's a lot of work. online classes and hybrid. Take it from me, online classes are not as easy as you would think they are. Just saying.
Yeah.
And but yeah, we had that conversation, and hopefully we see what happens in September. And then of course the folks from the Ministry of Mental Health and Wellness, along with PAHO, spoke to us about World Malaria Day. I never knew nobody who had malaria before, but it's a human for people. So
well, it's from a previous, it's from the past, like in other generations, right?
Yeah.
As you mentioned earlier, you don't really hear that much of malaria cases being reported, and I would want to think that that's a good thing.
And keep it that way. But of course, we have to go. We had a wonderful Monday. Thank you all so much for tuning in and starting your week with us here at Open Your Eyes. And if you have any questions or concerns, please drop us an email at oye@channel5belize.com or on our social media at Open Your Eyes BC on Facebook and at OYE Belize on Instagram. As always, we remind you to stay safe and wash your hands and keep your social distance, but to also keep your minds, your eyes,
and your hearts open.
Stay tuned, Belize. Have a safe week. See you tomorrow.
Open Your Eyes was brought to you by the Belize Bank. Our country, your bank.